Hello and welcome to Affinity Designer. My name is Nick and I've been a graphic designer for over 10 years and I've been using Affinity Designer for about 4 of those years. And in this video, I will be giving you a complete rundown of the Affinity Designer desktop application. So if you are a new user or even a first-time user, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you should know everything you need to know to get up and running with Affinity Designer. So let's jump right in and set up a new document. So whenever you launch Affinity Designer, you should get this screen here where you are asked to create a new document. We have a bunch of options in here for templates and pre-made designs, and we also have some preset templates over here as well. But the main thing you'll probably want to do is set your document size yourself. So over here, you can determine the width and height of your document, and you can choose whether you want the default unit of measurement to be pixels or inches or whatever else. For this demonstration, I'll be using 1280 by 720 pixels, which is a standard thumbnail design for a YouTube video. And the DPI by default is 72. So if you don't have it set to 72, make sure you have that set. And if you're designing something for print, we have some additional options over here. You could change your color profile. For example, you can switch to a CMYK color format if you're designing something for print. If not, I would recommend leaving it as RGB. It'll give you a greater color selection to work with. And if you want to add margins and bleed to your document, you can do that over here as well. And then you can change the scale of your document as well. This is for if you're designing something large. We're not going to focus on that for now, though. We're just going to focus on the main document right here. And once you have your settings in place, just go ahead and click the Create button. And now we have a new document in place. So now that we have a new document open, let's quickly go over the layout so that you know exactly what you're looking at here. So Affinity Designer breaks down into 2 applications. It's really a 2-in-1 design tool. There's the designer persona, which is the default, which allows you to work with vector graphics. And then there's the pixel persona, which allows you to work with pixel-based images. And you can toggle between those 2 personas with these 2 icons up here. So by default, you will be in the designer persona. And if you look over here on the left-hand side of your screen, you will see vector-based design tools. But if you come over here to the pixel persona, you'll see the tools change on the left-hand side because now we are in a pixel-based environment. Therefore, we have pixel-based design tools. So this is really handy. This is something that's really good with working with Affinity Designer. You can remove backgrounds from images and then incorporate them into a vector design all in the same application. So let me go back into the designer persona. We also have the export persona over here, which is a little more advanced. It's for exporting multiple objects at one time. We're not going to go over that in this video. For this video, we're just going to focus on the basics. So I'll come back over here into the designer persona. And as I mentioned before, we have our vector-based tools over here on the left-hand side of the screen. If you look at the top of the screen, we see some basic system controls. If you notice over here, we have the ability to flip objects horizontally, vertically, and then rotate them by 90 degrees clockwise and counterclockwise. And then over here, we have the alignment menu. You can't see these yet because I don't have any objects selected. So I'm just going to grab one of the shape tools and click and drag to draw a shape. And now I will be able to demonstrate these tools for you. So with that object selected, you can click on this menu here and you can see we have all of our alignment controls. We'll be going over this later. I just want to give you an overview for now. Over here, we can enable snapping or not. This icon, this magnet icon represents snapping. When it's enabled, that means objects will snap wherever you move them. And then over here, we have Boolean Operations, which allows you to take multiple shapes and create new shapes out of them based on how they interact with each other. And then over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you have your studio menus. Now there's actually a lot of different studio menus to work with. If you come up here to the window menu, you can see all of them. The only ones visible on the screen right now are the ones where you see the check mark enabled. So these are the default studio menus. Over here, we have the fill and stroke menu or the color menu, which allows you to apply fills and strokes to objects. And then over here, we have the stroke menu, which allows you to change the settings of a stroke. You can change the size and the width and everything. I'll be going over this later on. I just want to give you an overview for now. Then over here, you can set custom swatches. And then we have the appearance tab. So if you have an object selected, it'll show you the appearance attributes of that object. And then if we come down here, we have the layers menu. Now, every object that you create in Affinity Designer is placed on its own layer. So as you can see here, I created this object first, which has its own layer. And then I created this object second, which also is placed on top of it, although you can't see it because it's the same color. So I'm just going to make that a different color so you can see it. So I have 2 rectangles now, and you can see it updates in the layers menu. Now you can select your objects by clicking on them, or you can just select them in the layers menu here as well. And you can also use this to rearrange the stacking order of your object. So if you want this red square to be beneath this gray square, just click and drag this down here like that, And there you go. Now it's positioned beneath there. I'm going to undo that though. Over here we have QuickFX. These are certain effects that you can add to your object. So for example, if I wanted to add a drop shadow to this square, I can come over here and choose the outer shadow button, and I can increase the radius, and you can see it puts a shadow behind that red box, and I can even change the offset of it as well. And then over here you can change the degrees of that offset. Over here we have different brushes that we can work with. That's one of my custom brushes. By default, you should have something like markers or something like that enabled. These are some marker brushes that you can work with, and you can use this drop down over here to choose from different brushes as well. And then over here we have the Styles tab. These are just preset styles that you can add to objects. This isn't really important. Chances are you probably won't use these much. Personally, I've never used them, but if you want to give them a try, go ahead. You can click on that and apply that sort of style right there. Let me undo that. And then if you come down here, we have the Transform menu. The Transform menu allows you to change the width and the height and the rotation and the shearing of an object. So if I were to take, let me say, I'm going to take this object for example. If I wanted to change the width of it, I can change, well, first of all, I can change the width of this object by simply scaling it like that. But if I need this object to be a predefined width and height, like let's say, for example, I needed this object to be 250 by 250 pixels, I could just manually type that into the width and height option here. So I'm just going to type in 250, and then I'll come down here and type in 250 as well. And if you want to lock the aspect ratio so that one dimension scales in proportion with the other dimension, just click this chain icon, and now every time you change one of these dimensions, the other dimension will update alongside it. So let's say I want to make the height 400 pixels. You'll see that the width will automatically change to 400 pixels as well. And then over here we have the rotation. If you choose this rotation drop down, you can take this lever right here and rotate this around. Let me undo that. And then shearing as well. This allows you to shear, which brings it left and right like that. And if you notice over here, we have this box. This indicates the anchor point in which these transformations are made. So if you notice, I have this box selected by default, which means the object is shearing relative to that point of the object. If I were to change it to this location right here, it would now shear it based on that location, as you can see. And then over here we have the navigator. This shows you an overall view of the canvas. And then we have the history menu, which shows you everything that you've done in case you want to go back in time without hitting the undo buttons a bunch of times. That's a basic overview of Affinity Designer's layout. So now let's go over some basic controls when working in Affinity Designer. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these objects on my canvas. I'm just going to click on them and press the delete key, or you can select them in the layers menu and click the trash can icon to get rid of them. To navigate around your canvas, you can use the scroll bars on the page, or what I would recommend doing is just pressing down your mouse wheel and moving the mouse. And this is a much easier way to move around and access things while you're working than using the scroll bars. And to zoom in and out, if you are a Windows user, hold down your Control key and roll up and down your mouse wheel. Or if you are a Mac user, you can hold down the Option key and roll up and down your mouse wheel. Or if you're using a trackpad, you can just pinch with 2 fingers as if you were zooming in on an image. And this is a much easier way of navigating around your canvas. This is how I normally do things. And to zoom back out to 100%, just press Command 1 or Control 1, and it'll zoom you out to 100% so you can see a one-to-one view of your artwork. So now let me grab the Squares and Rectangles tool over here, and I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. And I'm going to draw a rectangle. If I click and drag, you can see I'm drawing a rectangle. Now I can choose to make the width larger than the height or the height larger than the width. But if I want to lock the aspect ratio, what I could do is hold the Shift key. And if you hold the Shift key, it locks it so that you are creating a perfectly symmetrical square like that. And if you hold the Control key as well, or the Command key at the same time, you can see it is scaling out from the center instead of down from the top left. So I'm going to create this object here like that. And now I'm going to grab my Selection tool. And with the Selection tool, you can use the Selection tool to move the object around, or you can bring your cursor out here to these handles. You can use these corner handles to change the width and the height. You can use the side edges to change the width and the height individually. Or if you want to rotate the object, you could just bring your canvas out here, or bring your cursor out here just outside of the handle. And if you notice, the cursor changes into a double arrow icon. And with that double arrow icon, you can rotate your object like that. And if you hold your Shift key while doing so, it'll lock it into 15-degree increments, as you can see there. And if at any point you want to undo what you did, just press Command Z or Control Z. And if you want to shear the object, you can do so up here using this handle. So I'll grab this handle, and you can see there I am shearing my object. Okay, so let me put that back in place. And those are some of the most common controls you will use in Affinity Designer. So now let's go over how you can draw shapes and objects using these basic shape and pen tools in the designer persona. So if you come over here, you can see we have our basic shapes. We have squares and circles. If you want to generate a square, you can do so like that. Again, hold your Shift key to draw a perfectly symmetrical square. And the same thing with circles and ellipses. You can draw a circle or an ellipse. If you want it to be a circle, just hold your Shift key. If you want it to be an ellipse, just let go of the Shift key and you can make it any way you want. And then over here, we have some more shapes as well. If you hold a click over this shape, we get a whole list of shapes in this menu here that you can choose from. We have rounded rectangles, triangles, stars, so on and so forth. You can even generate QR codes now with these tools. So as an example, let me grab the star tool, and I'm going to click and drag to draw a star. If you notice, as I draw it, it's being distorted, but if I hold the Shift key, it draws it with a proper aspect ratio. And every time you draw a shape, each shape will have its own set of tool options up here in the Tool Settings menu. So for example, stars let you change the inner radius of the star, the outer circle, or the inner circle, or the number of points. So for example, if I come over here and choose the point slider, I can add points to my star like that. I can set the inner radius so that the arms are longer or shorter. And then we have the outer circle selection. We can round the arms of the star. And then we have the inner circle as well, where we can round those. So you get sort of like you can kind of like make a gear shape, I guess, out of that. So that's just one example. Like I mentioned, every shape has its own settings that you can change in there. So let me get rid of that. And let me get rid of this as well. I'll show you one more just as an example. I'm going to choose the rounded rectangle tool, and I'll click and drag to draw a rounded rectangle. And if you want to change the radius of the corners of this rectangle, you can use the handle on the canvas like this, or you can come up here and use the corner setting in the Tool Settings menu. So let me get rid of this now. And now let's go over how you can draw custom shapes. To do that, you can use the pencil tool or the pen tool. So I'm going to use the pen tool to start off. I'm going to come over here and grab the pen tool. You can click on it right there or press the letter P on your keyboard. And what this does is it allows you to click and add points on your canvas like that. And you have these individual points, and then you can snap back to the original point and click on it. And now you have a closed shape that you just created like that. And if you want to change the locations of these points and edit them further, you can come over here to the nodes tool. And now you can change these points, which are known as nodes, by clicking and dragging them like that. And you can change the types of nodes as well. If you want to make these rounded, you can click on this setting up here in the Tool Settings menu to make it rounded. And now you can take this handle and change it like that. So this is really useful if you're tracing, for example, if you're tracing over an image and you want to create like a vectorized silhouette. The pen tool would be good for that because it allows you to create your own custom shape. So let me delete this and show you now what else you can do with the pen tool. I'll come back over here to the pen tool. You can also use the pen tool to draw curved lines. So if I click to add a point, I can hold the Shift key. And if you notice, if I hold the Shift key, it brings the line straight up like that, or it brings it straight diagonally or horizontally. I'll bring it up, click, and I'll let go of Shift. And if I bring my cursor out here and click and drag, instead of clicking, I'm going to click and drag. And as I do that, you can see it curves the line instead of drawing a straight line. So I can curve the line like that. And again, I can hold my Shift key to lock it horizontally and then let go. And then I can come down here and do the same thing. And then I can come down here, hold Shift, draw a straight line, and then back to the starting point like that. And you can see there we have a very sloppy shape. But you can clean this up by going into the Nodes tool and clicking on that node, and then just clicking and dragging this line like that. And now you can take this handle and straighten that out. Whoops, let me change that. You can straighten it out like this, hold your Shift key, and there you go. Now it looks a little better. We can do the same thing over here. Hold the Shift key, straighten that out. Move this over. And there you go. That's how you can draw shapes using the pen tool. Now don't be discouraged if you are struggling to use this tool. This is the most complicated tool to learn, in my opinion. It has the steepest learning curve. It takes a really long time to get the hang of this tool, so again, don't be discouraged if it's a little difficult at first. So let me grab this and delete this off of my canvas, and now I will show you how to use the pencil tool. So I'll grab the pencil tool, And the pencil tool works similarly to the pen tool. The only difference is it allows you to draw by clicking and dragging rather than clicking to add points. So with the pen tool, you're adding individual points and clicking. With the pencil tool, you are just clicking and dragging like this. And there you go, you end up with a shape like that. Now let's go over working with brushes. I'm going to come over here to my brushes tool and select that. And if you come over here to the brushes tab, you can see we have all of our different types of brushes that we can work with. I'm going to choose this brush here. If you come up here to this drop down, you can choose the different types of brushes. You can see we have all these different types. We have acrylics, engraving, inks, so on and so forth. You can even add your own custom brushes as well, which we will get into in a later tutorial. But for now, we're just going to focus on these system brushes. I'm going to choose the markers option, and I'm going to choose this brush over here that says Quick Marker Stroke 03. And I'll come over here to my canvas and I'll click and drag like that to draw a brush stroke. Now this came out large, so I'm going to undo that by pressing Command Z or Control Z if you're on Windows. And if you notice, the size of my cursor represents the size of the brush, and that size is rather large. You can change the size of the brush up here in the Tool Settings menu, but what I like to do is I like to just use the left and right bracket keys on the keyboard. So I'll use the left bracket key to bring down the size of the brush, and then I'll try it again. And now we get a much smaller brush stroke like that. And if you want to change the type of brush, you can just, well, first you'll have to grab the selection tool, select the brush stroke here, and now you can just cycle through these different brushes to see how they look. And if at any point you want to edit the brush stroke, just come back over here into your nodes tool, and you can change the locations of these nodes as we did previously with the other shapes. One last thing I'd like to show you about brushes. Let me take this and get rid of this now. I'm going to grab the circles and ellipses tool, and I'll click and drag to draw a circle. I'm going to hold my shift key so we get a nice circle like that. And let's say you want to apply a brush stroke to the shape. For example, you want to take one of these brushes and draw a perfect circle out of that. Well, you can use this shape as a reference point for your brush. So with the brush, or with the shape selected, I'm going to come over here to the brushes menu and click on one of the brushes, and you can see there it took the brush stroke and wrapped it around the shape. Now, if you want to change the size of the brush after it's already been drawn, what you can do is come over here to your stroke menu, and you can use the width slider to bring down the size of that brush stroke like that. And if you want to get rid of the fill so that there's no longer a color fill in there, just come over here to the color tab and make sure you have the fill option selected and click on this red slash right there to get rid of that fill. And now we have a circular brush stroke. Now let's go over how Boolean operations work. Boolean operations allow you to create new shapes based on the intersecting areas of other shapes. So I'm going to grab the square tool and I'm going to draw a square. I'm going to hold my shift key so I get a square. And I'm going to apply a fill color just so I can see what I'm doing here. And now I'm going to draw another shape. I'm going to grab my circle tool and I'm going to zoom in on this. And I'm going to draw a circle on top of this square. I'm going to hold my shift key so that we end up with something like that right there. And I will make this a different color. I'll come over here to my color tab and I'll change the color to something different. And now I'm going to grab my selection tool and I'm going to select both of these objects. Now there's two different ways in which you can select multiple objects. You can click and drag a selection over them like that, and now you have both of them selected. Or what you could do is click one of them and then hold shift and click the other, and now you have multiple selected. And you can also do that over here in the layers menu. You can click on one of them and then hold shift and click the other, and now you have both selected. So if you notice now, we have two shapes selected here. If I come up here to the top right of the screen, you can see the 5 different types of Boolean operations we have. The first one here is addition. If I click on this, if I click add, you'll notice what happens. It takes the two shapes and merges them together into a single shape. And if I come over here to the nodes tool, you can see that this is indeed a new shape. Affinity Designer no longer recognizes this as a square and a circle. It recognizes it as something altogether. So let me undo that. I'm going to press Command Z to undo what I did. And I'm going to go back to my selection tool. I'll make sure I have the two objects selected. And now I'm going to choose the subtract option. And watch what happens when I click on subtract. It took the top object and subtracted it from the bottom object. Okay, so that's important to understand. The way that this works is the top object will always be subtracted from the bottom object. So if I undo this, let's say I wanted the opposite result. If I wanted to subtract this square from this circle, I would have to position the circle beneath the square. So I can take the circle in the layers menu, click and drag it beneath the square, and now I can select both objects. And if I choose subtraction, now you can see we get that result right there. So let me undo that. And with both objects selected, what I'll do now is I will select the intersection option. If I click on intersect, you can see what happens there. It takes the intersecting area of the two shapes and creates a new shape out of it. So let me undo that. Over here, we have the exclude option, or it's called XOR, I believe. If you click on that, it takes the intersecting area and gets rid of it so that the excluded areas are all that remains. And then finally over here, we have the division option, or divide. If you click on that, you can see what happens. It divides it up into 3 separate shapes like that. And that is how you can work with Boolean operations. Now let's do a practice exercise which incorporates snapping as well as shape building, which is sort of like a more advanced version of Boolean operations. So I'm going to grab my circle tool, and I'm going to hold the Shift key and click and drag on the canvas to draw a perfectly round circle. And then I'll come over here to the transform menu, and I want to turn on the lock icon so that we lock the aspect ratio. And then I'll come over here to where it says width and height, and I'm just going to change one of these values to 600 and press enter. And now we should have a circle that is 600 by 600 pixels. So let me grab my selection tool. I'm going to place this circle directly in the center of the canvas by coming up here to the alignment menu and aligning it horizontally and vertically. And then I can close out of the menu and click off of the circle to deselect everything. Now I'm going to select this circle in the layers menu, and I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to go to duplicate. And now I'm going to change the size of this to 300. So I'll come down here and I will type in 300 and press enter. And I'm going to change the color of this to something else. So I'll go with red. And now I want to position this circle at the top center of this circle. Now we can do that with the alignment menu, but we can also do that with snapping, and snapping makes this a little quicker. So I'm going to come up here to this magnet icon and turn that on, and now I can take this circle and snap it directly to the top of the circle beneath it. And as you can see by the guides there that populate on the screen, they let you know exactly where it is snapped to, and I can let go of that, and there we go. And now I want to create a duplicate copy of this circle. So I'm going to hold my Option key, or your Alt key if you're on Windows, and click and drag to create a duplicate copy, and then let go of the key, and then just snap this one down here to the bottom like that. Now I'm going to right click this top circle and go to Duplicate. And I'll make this one a different color. And I'm going to scale this one down to 100. So I'll just type in 100. And I want to place this one in the center of the circle beneath it, just like that. And now I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to hold my Option key, click and drag to create a duplicate copy, let go of the Option key or the Alt key, and snap this one in the center of this object right here. Now I'm going to click and drag over everything to select all of these objects, and I'm going to come over here to the Shape Builder tool, which is located over here in the toolbar, or you can access it by pressing the letter S on your keyboard. Now with this tool enabled, if you come up here to the tool settings menu, you'll see we have 2 options. We have addition and subtraction. I'm first going to choose addition, and I'm going to draw a line going from this red circle to this gray portion of the circle like that. And when I do that, you can see what happens there. It combines it into one shape. And I'll do the same thing over here to this side. I'll connect those 2 together, and now we have another individual shape. Now what I could do is I can choose the subtraction option, and I can click on this object in the middle to delete it. And I can do the same thing over here. I can click on this object to delete that as well. And now we have negative space in there. So if I come back over here to my selection tool and click off of it to deselect everything, you can see we've created this yin-yang shape, and we have 2 different shapes now. So let me put that back by pressing Command Z. I'm going to make this one a different color. I'll make this one blue, and I'll leave that one red. And there you go. Just like that, we used the shape builder as well as snapping to create that simple yin-yang shape. So now that I no longer need snapping, I'm going to turn off the snapping option, otherwise that'll get in your way while you're working, and there you go. Now let's do a little practice exercise where we will put what we've learned so far into use, and then we will also go over how to use the Align and Distribute menu. So I'm going to come over here to my Shapes tool and hold a click over it, and I'm going to choose the Triangle tool, and I'll click and drag on the canvas to draw a triangle. Now I'll zoom in on this. So what I want to do now is I want to create a duplicate copy of this triangle. There are several ways that you can do that. You can right-click the layer over here and look for duplicate, but a better way to do that would be to grab your selection tool and then hold your Option key, or if you're on Windows, it would be the Alt key, and then click and drag the object. And as you can see, when I do that, it creates a duplicate copy of the object. Now, while holding my Option key, I'm going to hold the Shift key as well to lock it onto the vertical axis and bring it down like this. And now we have what sort of looks like a pine tree shape. So I'll select both of these objects, I'll merge them together using the add Boolean operation, and I'll make them green to look like a pine tree. And now I'm going to add a trunk to this tree. So let me click off of the object to deselect it. I'm going to grab the Squares and Rectangles tool, and I will click and drag to draw a square over the bottom of the tree like that. And I will zoom in a little closer to see that. And I want to make this the color of a tree trunk. So let me change the color. And I want to position this beneath the tree shape. So I'm going to grab my selection tool, and I'm going to take the shape over here in the Layers menu and click and drag it beneath the other shape. And now I want to place the object directly in the center of the pine tree, because as you can see here, it's a little off center. So to do that, I'm going to use the Align and Distribute menu. So let me show you how that works. First, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'll open up the Align and Distribute menu, and we can align horizontally and vertically. Now, if I click the center option on both of these, you can see what it does. It centers the object on the center of the page. It's not centered relative to the object, it's just centered relative to the page. So if I want to center it relative to the object, let me undo what I just did right there. Well, actually, no, I want to redo that. So to center it relative to the tree, I'm going to hold the Shift key and select the tree so that I have both objects selected. And then I'll come over here to the Align menu, and I will align them horizontally. And now it'll align the object relative to the object that I have selected. And now it's placed directly in the center. So let me close out of this menu. Now let's say I want to take both of these objects and center them together on the page. Well, if I do that, it's not going to work because it's only going to center relative to each other. So what I need to do is I need to make them function as a unit. Now, if I add them together using the Boolean operations, it's not going to work because it's going to combine them into one shape, meaning it can only have one color and it loses the effect. So let me undo that. What you'll want to do is group them instead. Grouping is a way to take two objects and temporarily make them function as a unit. So with the object selected, I'll come over here to Layer and I will choose Group. And now I can take this object, it will now function as an individual unit. And you can see over here in the Layers menu, it's represented by a single object. And if I want to edit those objects, I could just expand this menu and I could select those individual objects individually. So let me collapse this and let me center this on the page. I'll come over here to my Align and Distribute menu and I will center it vertically and horizontally like that. And now it's centered directly on the page. And the good thing about grouping is that it's a non-destructive function. So if I want to ungroup them, I can just come over here and go to Layer and select Ungroup. And now it's back to functioning as individual objects. And you can see that over here in the Layers menu. So now I'm going to grab my Circles tool. I'll click and drag to draw a circle. I'll hold my Shift key. And I'm going to make this a different color. I'm going to draw this to be a moon. So I'm going to make this a different color, maybe like a yellow color. And now I'm going to take the Selection tool and I'm going to press the Option key or the Alt key on Windows and click and drag to create a duplicate copy and then hold the Shift key and move it up and to the right like this. And I'll make it a different color just so I can differentiate it from the other object. And now I'm going to scale it down by holding Command and Shift and clicking and dragging like that. If you're using Windows, it would be Control and Shift. We're going to scale it from the center like that, right about that much. And what I'm paying attention to here is the excluded area outside of here, because I'm going to make this into a crescent moon. So I want to make this a little larger, actually. I'm going to take this handle and hold Shift and scale that up a little bit. And this looks more like a crescent moon shape. So that looks good right there. I'll hold the Shift key, click on that object, and I'll come over here to the Boolean Operations and I will select Subtract. And now if you zoom out, you can see we have a little crescent moon shape that we could place next to our tree. And you could even scale this down if you want. Just make sure to hold your Shift key while doing that to preserve the aspect ratio. And there you go. That is how you can use the Align menu. Now let's go over how we can use QuickFX in Affinity Designer. I'm going to combine the pine tree and the trunk together so that they're a single object by grouping them. So I'm going to click on the object and then I'll hold Shift and click on the other object so that I have them both selected, and I will go to Layer and select Group. Now with this grouping selected, I'll come over here to the QuickFX tab, and what I'm looking for is Outline. We have a bunch of different effects that we can work with, but I'm going to start with Outline. I'm going to place an outline around my object, and I'm going to use the radius right here and bring this out. And as you can see, as I bring that out, it is creating an outline going around the object. And if I want to change the opacity of that outline, I can use this opacity here to make it partially transparent. Or if I want to change the color of it, I can select this color stripe right here and change a new color. So I can give this outline a different color if I'd like. I can use these sliders and change the color of the outline so that we have something like that. I'll go with maybe a light green. Now I'm going to select the moon and do the same thing. Let me move this over. I'm going to add an outline. I'll bring the radius out. And I will change the color of this as well. Maybe something a little off yellow. Maybe like a darker yellow or an orange. There we go. Now I'm going to select my original object or my original grouping, and I'm going to apply a drop shadow beneath the outline. So let me collapse the outline option, and now I'm going to select outer shadow. I'll bring the opacity all the way up, and I'll take the radius and increase it so that we have a shadow going outside of the outline. And I will even take the offset and bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to take the angle and make it so that it's going at 270 degrees so that the shadow is going down. And now I'll come back over here to my outline and I will make this white instead of green. And now you can see the effect there. We have sort of like an outline effect with a little bit of a drop shadow behind it. So it looks sort of like a sticker. And I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to select this object. Let me apply an outer shadow. Bring the opacity up. Increase the radius. I'm going to change the angle to 270 and bring that down a little bit. And then I'll take the original outline and I will change that from orange to white so that we have a similar effect there. And now you can see we've created this sticker-like effect just by applying some QuickFX. Now the good thing about QuickFX is that they are non-destructive, so you can remove them at any time. So I'll select my object and I will remove the outline and then I will remove the outer shadow. And as you can see here, there's a bunch of them you can play around with. I'll select inner glow just as an example. I'll increase the radius of this. And now you can see I'm creating an inner glow on the object. And if you want to change the color of the glow, you could do so by selecting the color stripe and changing the color. So let me go with like a neon green for the inner glow and see how that looks. There we go. And I'll do the same thing over here. Let's get rid of the outer shadow, get rid of the outline, and let's put an inner glow on this one as well. I'll bring the radius up and I will make the color of this one maybe a deeper red, like a blood orange. Okay, so this one's a little hard to see. I'm going to zoom in on this a little more. Let me try a different color instead. Okay, this one's not appearing as well because the yellow color of the object is a light color as it is. So I'm going to make the object a different color just so you can see what I'm doing here. I'll make this blue, make it a little darker, and now you should be able to see the inner glow a little more. There we go. Maybe not a good example of color selection, but I'm sure you get the idea. That's how you can add quick effects to your objects in Affinity Designer. And again, if you want to remove them at any time, just click on them and select them and remove them like that. And go ahead and check all of these out. You could play around with all of these if you want. For example, if you want to give this object a Gaussian blur, you can select that one and apply a Gaussian blur. And there you go. You get the idea. So that's how you can use quick effects in Affinity Designer. Now let's go over working with the pixel persona in Affinity Designer. So I'm going to locate a pixel-based image, whether it be a PNG or a JPEG, and I'm going to right-click it and open it with Affinity Designer. Now once you've opened it, you'll notice it opens as a separate document in a new tab. So if I come over here to this tab, you can see the original document we were working with, but over here is the new document in a separate tab. It's sort of like how a web browser works. Now we're going to enter the pixel persona. So come up here to the top left of the screen and click on the icon that says pixel persona when you hover your cursor over it. And once you do that, you'll notice we have all of these pixel-based tools for working with selections. So I'm going to come over here to the layers menu. If you notice there's a lock icon applied to your images layer, go ahead and click on that to remove the lock, otherwise you won't be able to make any transformations to the image, and then right-click the layer and go down to where it says rasterize. This will make it so that the image has a transparent alpha channel beneath it. Now I'm going to come over here to the tool menu. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a selection going around this basketball, and I'm going to delete the background from this image. There's various ways we can do this. If you look over here, we have different ways that we can create selections. You can create rectangular selections, circular selections, or you can even use this freehand tool to create your own freehand selections. For this demonstration, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to choose the circular selection. And I'm going to place the cursor in the middle of the object, and I'm going to click and drag. And as I do that, you'll notice I'm creating a circular selection with marching ants around it, or a marquee as it's known. Now I'm going to hold the shift key while I do that so I get a perfectly round circle. And if you want to move the selection while you're drawing it, just press down the spacebar key and you'll be able to move around the selection on the page to center it where you need it to be. And then you can release the spacebar and continue sizing your selection as needed. So I'll place my selection right about there. I'll let go of the spacebar, bring it down a little more. And right about there looks pretty good. It's not exactly accurate, but it's good enough. I'm going to release the click. And now, with that selection in place, I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard. And you notice, just like that, I was able to delete that area of the selection from the image. And you can see the checkerboard pattern there beneath it. That checkerboard pattern represents transparency. So wherever you see that checkerboard, that is where your image is transparent. And if you want to remove the selection, now just go to Select and choose Deselect, and now the selection is disabled. Now let me undo what I just did right there. I'm going to press Command-Z a couple of times. Let's say I don't want to delete the basketball. Let's say I want to delete everything outside of the basketball instead. This is where we'll have to invert the selection. So now I'll come up here to where it says Select, and I will go to Invert Pixel Selection, and nothing will visibly change on your canvas, but what happened is you've created a selection around the outside area rather than the inside area. And if I press the delete key, you can see the result I get there. It deleted the area outside of the selection. So let me undo that by pressing Command-Z a couple of times. And now I'm going to undo the selection by going to Select and choosing Deselect. And that is how you can work with basic selections in Affinity Designer. So let me show you a couple of other ways here. We have rectangular selections, which work the same way, only in a rectangular shape. And then we have freehand selections, which also work the same, only you can draw your own freehand selections just like that. Now let's have a look at a more advanced way of creating selections on your document. Let's say I wanted to delete the background from this image so that we only have the subject and the basketball remaining. First, let me unlock the layer. I'll right-click the layer and rasterize it. And now I'm going to use the selection brush, which is located over here. If you hover your cursor over it, you can see it says selection brush, or you can press the W key on your keyboard to access it. And this functions similarly to any other brush. You can use your left and right bracket keys to increase and decrease the size of it. And if you come over here to your brushes menu, you can see the brush type that we're working with. So I'm going to work with a really hard brush type right here. I'm going to choose this round brush. And what I'm going to do is let me bring down the size of this brush a little bit. I'm going to start painting a selection inside of my subject. And as I do that, you'll notice that the marquee is going around the edges of the subject as long as I bring it close enough to the subject and I don't go outside of it. If I go too far outside of it, what you can do is, hold on, let me show you a better example. So I will keep going through here and creating a selection around my subject. And if you go too far like I just did right there, if you notice I just kind of brought the brush outside of the subject. If you need to bring that back in, just hold your Option key or your Alt key if you're on Windows and then brush it back in like that. So I'm going to bring my brush down smaller. If you're using smaller areas right here, you're going to want to use a smaller brush size. So I brought my brush size down and I'm going to hold the Alt key or the Option key and bring that in. And then I will continue creating my selection around the rest of the subject. And what you can do is you can increase the size of the brush for these larger areas here. So I'm going to fill in this whole area right here. So I'll make this brush nice and big. And there we go. I can paint that in much quicker now with a larger brush. Now, bringing your brush size down smaller is really important with areas such as fingers where you don't want the brush to go outside of the selection area. And as you could probably tell here, this is an AI generated image by the extra fingers. Okay, so I've created a selection going around the subject, and now I'm going to continue this selection over here by drawing within the basketball as well, so that we're going to have two separate selections, even though they're not connected. Now, once you're finished creating your selection, depending on your image, you may find it's difficult to see exactly where the selection or the marquee lies. On my image, it's pretty easy, but if you're working with an image with more detail, it may be a little more difficult for you to see where it is. In that instance, we can use the Refine button up here. So I'll come up here to where it says Refine, and I'll click on that. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a red mask going over the areas that aren't selected. And what you could do now is use the foreground and background options to further define the selection. So if I zoom in over here, you can see where the hair is. You'll notice that some of that is showing through. Let me undo that. I'm going to choose the background option, and I'm going to bring my brush down smaller, and I'm going to try to remove some of that hair out of there and see if it picks it up. There we go. That looks a lot better. And I'll do the same thing over here. And once you're finished, you can click Apply. And now I'm going to invert the selection by going to Select and choosing Invert Pixel Selection. And I will press the Delete key on my keyboard. And then I will go to Select. I will choose Deselect. And now we have deleted the background from the image. Now let's go over how you can save your work in its native format in case you'd like to close out of Affinity Designer and come back and continue working on it later on. To do that, we're going to come up here to where it says File and go to Save As. And I'm going to choose a name for this document. I'm going to name this one Yin Yang. And if you notice here, the file extension is .afdesign. That is Affinity Designer's native file format. So if you want to be able to pick up right where you left off and continue working on this document without anything changing, make sure you save it as that format and then click the Save button, and then you'll be good to go. Now, let me show you how you can take this file and export it as a PNG image with a transparent background. So to do that, I'm going to select the areas of the image that I want to export. I'm going to select both of these objects here. And now, instead of saving, we're going to export it. So let's come up here to File, and let's go to Export. Up here from this drop-down, look for where it says PNG. If you notice, we have a bunch of different file formats you can export as. You can export as WebP or a GIF or anything else if you want. For this demonstration, we're just going to use PNG because it's the most common. And if you notice, over here we have the original width and height. If you want to change that, you can do so. So for example, the original document size is 1280 by 720. But if you want to export this as a larger size, you can just change those numbers there without affecting the size of the actual document. And then down here, we can choose the area we want to export. So by default, we have whole document selected. Now, if you look over here in the preview, you can see what's going to be exported. It's not just exporting the yin yang, it's exporting the entire document as well. If you just want to export the selection, select the drop-down and choose where it says Selection Only, and you will see that the preview updates and you can see the checkerboard in the background representing the areas where there's transparency. Now this shape is sized at 600 by 600 pixels, but I want my PNG to be a little larger than that. So I'm going to size this by 1280 instead. And then I will click the Export button. Give your file whatever name you'd like to save it as and click the Save button. And as you can see, I have opened up the PNG image in its original form, and you can see all of the transparent areas showing through as represented by this dark gray space. So that is how you can export your work as a PNG image. So as I'm sure you can tell by now, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what's possible in Affinity Designer. This software is packed with tons of tools and advanced features that lets you do all kinds of things from creating logos, designing t-shirts, working with mock-up files, and so on and so forth. If you want to learn more about Affinity Designer, then be sure to check out my Affinity Designer Masterclass. It's a collection of over 80 videos where I go over every tool, feature, and setting in this software, and I explain what it is and demonstrate how it works. Kind of like how I did in this video. We even have a private community where you can ask questions and get help from me whenever you need it. I'm in there every morning answering your questions, and the cost is only a one-time fee of $17. There's no monthly fees or yearly membership charges or anything like that. You just pay one time and you're in for life. I'll leave a link in the description of the video if you want to check that out, and as always, thanks for watching.